Hello and welcome, my friends. It's been a while, but here I am again, ready to get all story gory. Sorry about the bad pun. In tonight's story, we'll again get close and personal with my, if not immediate, but my very close family. Tonight's story is an experience by my grandmother, and it's both scary and haunting in a particularly sad way that brings me to consider the different psychological experiences and the emotional trauma and turbulences that one has to come across during one's life. My grandfather died in the winter of 1994, and this, of course, caused a lot of sorrow for my grandmother. In addition to grief, there may have been some mixed feelings of regret too, because some months before my grandfather's death, he had been transferred to a nursing home. You have to understand that this was after my grandmother, she was feeling a little bit sick herself, and she was no longer able to effectively care for my grandfather. And this became evident when my grandfather took some bad tumbles during his nightly visits to the loo. And after these occurrences, it became quite difficult for him to walk. So my grandmother, who was feeling quite weak and weary and who was getting pretty old herself, she was feeling unable to care for her husband. So that is why my family together decided for the nursing home to be the best possible option in that situation. But unfortunately, my grandfather had not been treated very well at the nursing home. The treatment was far from appropriate. The medication that he had been given had not been downed with a sufficient amount of water, so the pills had actually corroded his pharynx. So finally he couldn't eat properly anymore, and therefore actually his cause of death was nothing short of horrible. It was concluded that because of the neglect and the resulting hole in his pharynx, he had actually died of malnutrition and hunger. Because of this, I suspect that my grandma may have harbored some feelings of regret, guilt even. This may account for some of the psychology behind the experience that she had, and that in turn I am now going to tell you. To give you some background information, in my childhood, I was in the habit of spending a great deal of time at my grandmother's place in the countryside. I had spent the vast majority of my summers in her country house. The house was a relatively new building with spacious rooms and large windows, and I had always felt safe and at ease there. I have really good memories from that place. However, in my teenage years, and especially after the death of my grandpa, my visits had grown fewer and fewer. And actually, I don't think that I ever spent another night in that house after my grandpa had passed away. In the summer following my grandpa's death, I was visiting my grandma one morning and I was taken aback a little, for she seemed to be sullen and withdrawn for some reason. I didn't quite know how to inquire about her weird mood, but I guess that I just had a quizzical look on my face because my grandmother soon opened up about her thoughts, the thoughts that she had had on her mind all morning. She told me that she had suddenly woken up in the middle of the night, feeling awful, tense and sweaty. She had turned her head, and with her head still resting on the pillow, she had recoiled in horror at the sight of what lay next to her in her bed. My grandpa lay on the bed next to her, with his bald head weighing down on another pillow. So the head was like half sunken inside the pillow. His cheeks were all hollow and the head was almost skull-like, but still clearly recognizable to be my grandpa, as this was how my grandpa had looked in his final days. And as if it were not enough to witness this side of him, my grandpa also made a long wailing moan, and after that a whimpering cry. For a moment he was silent, but then the crying started again. My grandmother told me that she doesn't have any idea of how long this all lasted. She was too horrified and too awestruck to move. But at some point in time, she just closed her eyes and the sight was gone. Gone was the weeping too. There was nothing to be seen anymore. When my grandma told me this story, she was sad beyond any consolation. She didn't say it, but she didn't have to. Her eyes were pooling with tears. It was almost like she was now convinced that my grandpa was in some sort of a desperate limbo, a horrified lost soul, weeping and moaning in some other dimension, trapped and alone. But it didn't all end there. Sometime later on in the summer, my grandma also told me that she had woken up again in the middle of the night to the sounds of something scratching the walls of the house outside her bedroom. After a while of these scratching sounds, there was again wailing and crying, these guttural sounds of tearful despair. My grandma said that they had kept her awake almost all night, at that time. Okay, that was the story for tonight. For me, this story is not so nice because it, of course, it deals with my dear, kind-hearted grandpa, but because it is also pretty unnerving and scary, I just wanted to share it, nevertheless. Before I go, I have one request to make, in case there is anyone willing to get their own intriguing ghost stories or folklore tales out in the open. If you have any nice Finnish northern ghost stories to tell and to share with me, go ahead and please do send me those, and I will turn them into stories to post them here on my channel. I think it would be really nice if we could make this into a habit to continue for years to come. Alright folks, this is it now. I am off to start a long, nice nightly ride in my car. I enjoy those a lot. Alone in the darkness, driving my car. So, I am really looking forward to that rocking and rolling in just the headlights of my car, the darkness surrounding me, and the moon on the night sky. So, bye now, and thank you for listening. Couldn't be any more difficult today.